Tone, lesson 3 of 4 on how to analyze text. Let's get started. What exactly is tone? The tone is a writer's attitude toward a given topic. So, this is the intended meaning that the writer has. Unlike mood, which is the atmosphere created by the writing, often the reader's reaction to the writing, tone is what the writer intended to mean. And this tone is revealed by a selection and an omission of details, meaning the things that are there are implicative of a tone. But the things that are not there, the things that could have been there, that word instead of another word, that also implies tone. So you have to pay attention to both because tone is notoriously elusive. Tone is difficult to pinpoint because tone is created in context, right? These passages that we're reading for AP Lang are all created in time. So because they were created in time, rarely do they directly say, this is what I mean. Banneker doesn't write to Jefferson to say, I don't like slavery, please abolish it. Thank you very much. No, he says, sir, remember, implicit here, sir, remember that you were once bound to the British. Sir, remember that you wrote in the Declaration of Independence that everybody should be equal, every man should be equal. Sir. And then as he continues with the word sir, this repetition becomes more indignant, thereby revealing his tone, right? Which is, I don't like it. So that's why tone has to be extracted from the text, right? So let's look at two basic tones, or rather two basic categories of tones. There is the objective and the subjective. We are not going to focus on the objective all that much because that rarely happens in an AP line text. In fact, the objective tones that we have seen, like the nude statues, was only objective and neutral and impartial at the beginning to then reveal his biases. So for the most part, objective tone is not the kind that we work with, but it is there. Now, subjective is the one that we work with, and there's so many under each of these two categories. But subjective is the one we're going to focus on because it is much more personal and emotional and biased, as I mentioned before. Now, when analyzing the tone, we want to remember that there is an attitude, right? And what is that attitude of the text? And this attitude is revealed through adjectives and verbs, images. We have to remember that words themselves are the ones revealing the tone. So we always want to say, this is what I think the tone is because of this word, right? Now, when we're looking at satire, you have to be careful because satires use hyperboles and understatements, which both create irony, which is the subtext of a satire. So if these words are creating this meaning in a satiric, you have to understand that the opposite is intended, right? But that we'll cover in a separate lesson on satires. Now, tone, especially for the kind of text that we work with, tone always shifts, meaning he begins one way and then ends another. She begins apologetically and then becomes demanding. It's that's always the way it is. Tone always shifts, can shift more than once, obviously, in a text. But often, when you're looking at a section within the FRQ2, all you have to do is sometimes cut it in half. And that's something we're going to talk about in another lesson. But we have to look at the way the tone shifts from beginning to end. And there's often signal words that tell you where the tone is shifting. But, however, sometimes not a word, but just the phrase. But this phrase is often negative or in negation or in contradiction to the earlier points. So keep in mind that the tone is always shifting within a text. Now, how exactly is tone created in a text? There are three specific categories: language and style, point of view, and figurative language. For language and style, we'll talk about diction, syntax, and details. For point of view is where it's coming from, right? So it's very important to analyze who the speaker is and his or her relationship to the topic. In figurative language, I picked these four because I think these four are the most common and the most important, therefore. But this page you're going to work with as a follow-up assignment. So let's keep going, and then I'll backtrack to this. Now, let's look at an example when writing about tone. This is from Nick. This is his paragraph, is this one and this one. So I have highlighted the portions where he implies, right, his understanding of the tone of the text. So, for instance, back to that Banneker example in Jefferson. So he's writing to Jefferson. He's a former slave writing to Jefferson to ask, or rather demand, we get to know for the abolition of slavery. So Banneker begins by posing the colonists as slaves under the British, asking Jefferson to, quote, recall to your mind that time in which the arms and the tyranny of the British crown were exerted with every powerful effort in order to reduce you to a state of servitude, in order to bring upon a time in which Jefferson and his people felt the same way the slaves felt. There it is. Using recalling to your mind, which is a very personal thing. Remember, Jefferson, how you went through it. Now imagine how we feel. So he feels like we feel. That's the idea here. The use of the phrase state of servitude poses, now here's how he does it. He fixates on this specific moment in the text in order to imply meaning. So the use of the phrase state of servitude poses the people as slaves, serving under the tyrannical ruler, just as slaves serve under their relentless master. This incites Jefferson's sympathy. So why use state of servitude? In order to imply how. Why? Because he didn't say you were slaves to the British, because they technically weren't. But when you say state of servitude, then you're implying you were servants to the British, almost in a tyrannical ruler, and you were servants, but almost like slaves. And now I can connect it to how we are slaves, and I can evoke a certain emotion, a connection from you, right? Let's keep going. This sympathy, the writer continues, and compassion felt toward the slaves allows Banneker to be more impactful and convincing why? Because he reminds Jefferson of the actions he took when he felt like a slave, right? You were in a state of servitude, and he clearly saw into the injustice of the state of slavery, right? And your abhorrence thereof was so excited that you publicly held forth the Declaration of Independence. So he says, you were affected, you were indignant because you were in a state of servitude, and you declared yourselves independent. So this connection to the colony's feeling of state of slavery and the Declaration of Independence functions as an analogy to the slave's feelings. Because now, just like Jefferson wrote, and this is added commentary that he could have added to it. So just as Jefferson wrote his Declaration of Independence, I, Banneker, am writing my own kind of Declaration of Independence. I am declaring myself that we should be free, and I'm declaring it to you, you who freed yourself from the tyrannical ruler, now become the tyrannical ruler, and I have to declare myself free from you, right? So this gets Jefferson to understand and sympathize with the slaves. Now, that is how you write about tone. How you fixate on moments in the text in order to write about tone. Now, what exactly is your follow-up assignment? You want to use this. This is the slide that I told you before. You're going to analyze all of these in one given text. Booth Loose. This is the one about the state of the American press. You're going to identify, doesn't have to be in a paragraph, how the tone is created by all of the following. Okay? And this one, I think it's pretty good. So this one will give you all the stuff you need. All right? That's it. We're done.